Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
10 years ago, Conrad Nelson directed Deborah McAndrew's adaptation of Dario Fo's Accidental Death of an Anarchist for Halifax-based company Northern Broadsides. Now they return with another of the Italian playwright's works, creating a brand new version for Northern Broadsides and York Theatre Royal of They Don't Pay, We Won't Pay, for an uncertain Brexit Britain riven with food poverty and other effects of austerity-driven policies. In classic Fo tradition, the play makes biting social and political points while being riotously funny. And I'm here to talk to Conrad and Deb about their updated production as well as latest developments at Northern Broadsides. So, hello Conrad.
Hello.
Hello Deb.
Hello.
Could you start by telling us a bit about the piece and why you decided right now to adapt this play?
Well, I wanted to. I mean, you've mentioned in the introduction there that 10 years ago we did the Dario Fo Accidental Death of an Anarchist, and because of politics were always great fun to satirise. So now in 2018, as we slide into Brexit or thump into Brexit, whatever, to revisit a play like this seems exactly the time to do it. And that notion that we keep Dario Fo fresh, even in our translation and adaptation, we can do that now. There's great material within the original play. I think that's what he would have liked. You know, he was always rewriting, reinterpreting plays to keep them on the zeitgeist, keep them fresh politically and socially. And that's why we're doing it now, really, because it is the time to do it. If you can't do Dario Fo political farce now, when can you?
I think, you know, this play, which was originally called Can't Pay, Won't Pay, which Fo himself revisited after the banking crash of 2008 and reworked it. So that's the version that I've worked from. It's a great template, really. There's, it's a sort of like a framing in which you can peg lots and lots of political comment, and without being too kind of clever and arch and clever about it, I suppose is what I mean, is to have a bit of fun with it. And what he was brilliant at was just seeing the absurdity in the most awful situations. And I'm pretty sure it's a Karl Marx quote that history is reenacted first as tragedy and then as farce, and in Dario Fo's work it's both at the same time, and that's what you get. And so it just offers up riches really to mine, and we have lots to talk about and lots to make fun of.
So I don't know I haven't read or seen your version yet, and it's sort of still ongoing. You're in rehearsals right as we speak, and I have read a translation, but not the reworked one. It's one from based on his their original version of the play, I suppose, from
74 originally.
Yeah. Now there's a lot I can see in the parallels between the politics of then in Italy and now in the UK, but there's also a lot of difference. I mean, there's stuff in there about the sort of the Communist Party and sort of they're a very sort of important kind of presence in the play, subject for mockery. How have you gone about finding parallels for that sort of?
Obviously we've got the character which in the original is Giovanni, in our version is Jack. And I think in the original, Giovanni is a member of the Communist Party, and Jack is clearly a member of the Labour Party. And at the moment, the Labour Party is pretty far to the left. And there are aspects of that which I think are up for grabs, really, in terms of political satire. So there's. I just think there are parallels, there are opportunities. In the original, Antonia, who's Anthea in our version, Antonia sort of says to her husband, "What's your lot doing about it all, eh?" Well, I think quite clearly my Anthea can say to Jack, "What's your lot doing about it?" And he says, "Well, we're not in power." Well, why not?
Yes,
I think we can, and I don't feel as the playwright, I think Fo did sort of. I don't think he came up with any answers particularly either. He just asks a lot of questions, and I think it's the job of the playwright, if it's anything in political drama, to ask the questions, not necessarily to provide the answers. And I think that in that way, we in our presenting our play and giving our play to our audience, who will be very divided on lots of things. There'll be people from Momentum there, and people who read the Mail every day. There'll be all kinds of people in there. And we've got to take them all with us, and we've got to help them all to kind of connect, laugh at themselves, wonder about maybe challenging their own preconceptions, whatever they may be. And so that's our job. It's not our job to go, this is what you have to think, this is what you should be thinking. Definitely not. It's our job to go, it's all a bit stupid. Let's question everything. And I think that's what Fo does, and similarly that's what we do. And so, yeah, we can have a go at the Tories and we can have a go at the Labour Party as well, and there's and all shades in between.
Yes. I'm sort of realising I've read the play in one version quite recently, and you're obviously deep in the midst of working on it, but people might not necessarily be familiar with the play. So could you give us maybe sort of a potted kind of like, what's the scenario here? How does this play operate?
Well, essentially, the women or people have looted a shop of its contents. Essentially, there's a rush on, isn't there? That's
well, it's sort of, yeah, you've got a situation where the inciting incident, as they say these days, is a raid on a supermarket in which people have arrived at the supermarket and the prices have gone up again because at the time Fo was writing this play there was galloping inflation in Italy. We have a slightly different context here, but it's the similar kind of thing, is people can't afford the food, so they pay what they can. And that sort of sets off this chain of events with the police chasing and the husbands being hidden from them. And
essentially, it's about hiding the food, isn't it? Really, I mean, it's as sort of simple as that. I mean, it's it's sort of like most things, as it spirals out of control because they shove it up their clothes, and there's a sequence of it there. Then they pretend to be pregnant, and then they believe that, and then there's a sort of.
So then, where are the babies when there's no? But you know what I mean, it is farce, and it gets increasingly ridiculous, and the pace of it has got to, because it is so daft. You've got to take the audience with you at such a pace, so they never ever have the chance to think, what? You know, you've got to kind of just go with it, and that's in the playing of it, and that's the skill of the performers, and it was Dario Fo's own personal skill, and his wife Franca Rama as well as performers. They just could do this so brilliantly. And as as the process in the room of directing it, once I've handed over the script, you know, it's up to them in the room then to make it live and in a additional ways.
And it's interesting, when we did Accidental Death of an Anarchist and this as well, there isn't, although he may have done originally improvised large sections, and I'm sure there's great joy in that, we can't spend 3 weeks improvising hiding a food routine because we've got 3 weeks to do the whole lot. So in addition to the physical comedy, there's a lot of words. So you're marrying the two. So it's about precision. And actually, I do generally railroad the process a little bit, because in the first 2 weeks we need to put down something down in order to then have your improvisation. We could improvise forever and not get where we want to be. So it is prescriptive is not the right word, because we just open the page and we start working. I don't know where it's going to go. I'm not coming in. You know, some plays you can say, I need it to work like that. I need it to work on the stage like I like that, just as a physical journey, as well as obviously the text comes first. But this is about just reacting to what you have before you. So I'm improvising.
Yeah.
I'm improvising, I suppose, and I'm passing on the improvisation, which is a tricky task. I get that, you know, and at the end of the day, they're absolutely full and probably really fed up of me because I'm just riffing. I'm just putting it all down there and thinking what it tastes like, this scene, what it should feel like. But it's not a preconceived idea. It just happens in the moment that it happens. So it does have that freshness to it. But then we need to, you know, farce only works. Sometimes you can only open a door one way to get a gag. It's not just about gags all the time, but there are a lot of gags in it. You can't open it the other way. It just doesn't work. And you just have to obey those rules sometimes. And there's so much, there's like 9/10 under the surface that nobody will know the amount of work it takes to get to the point where it just works like that. It isn't smooth. It's really, really technical. Much more difficult and it's not woolly. There is no woolliness in it at all, so it won't be after 3 weeks. But then they've got to, you know, after us trying to put these guidelines down, me trying to second guess what the audience response is all the time. So I'm doing it from the point of view of what goes on stage, but also half my head is thinking, how are they going to react? And that's important. You've got to think, how do the audience respond? Otherwise, you're doing this in a vacuum. And I think particularly with farce, you can't. It's about their response. Now, some of that engineering will work, and some of it will be confounded by the audience response. So that's when the whole thing will get, more responsive and looser once we put it in front of the essential part, which is the audience. And how will it work then? What is the music of the piece? It will change, and as the actors sink into it, and they find their own rhythms. So this first edition, we're in sort of second week of rehearsal at the moment. But actually, we've only done 5 days of rehearsal, because first day is hello everybody and have a coffee. Second day is have a read of the script, see what it needs to be. Let's just voice that. So really, it's only 5 days of working. By the time we get to the middle of the second week, Thursday, we'll have got a rough template for the whole play. That's working really fast, and I think that's the only way I can do it is to get it down. And it's great because you can get to the end of the piece and you can close the book, and then you can start thinking, okay, there's the template for us. So yes.
And you've both obviously got a lot of experience as performers yourselves. Do you think that sort of helps with those sort of shortcuts that you find it easier to envisage? That here's the beat, here's what the audience is.
Well, I think so, but I would say that other people might say it's a pain in the bum, because you've got a desk in the room, a sort of director's desk where the stage management sit behind. Sometimes you sit there and maybe you cast ideas across the table into the space. Well, I don't want a table. I just want to be on my feet, looking at different places and getting up and smelling it and tasting it. That's the way I think it works for me, rather than... I mean, the thing is, it could take you ages to explain what you want, but actually sometimes you just say, pick up the thing there, stick it down there. It could take 20 years to improvise that, and it's not right. So sometimes you just have to be a little bit more direct.
Yeah. And certainly in terms of the music of the script, that's exactly as well, it's what's sayable. And finding that out, and particularly in working in translation as well. Even after sort of working and reworking the script and everything, I still sometimes in translation go, that still sounds a bit like a Euro-pop lyric. Because that's sort of what happens to translation. So it's about, absolutely feeling out how it can sit inside the actor's mouth, really, and how it feels and how it comes out.
Also, that's the process of adaptation. So it's not just a simple translation, because you could go to Google probably and just press translate, and you get a rough version of what it is, but it just doesn't interpret the intention. So when Deb's doing those adaptations with both faux plays we've done today, there will be an explanation that goes with the draft one that says this is why the choices have been made. This
when it goes to Italy for their sanction, as it were, a letter goes with it, and I explain exactly what I've done and why I've done it. Here are the parallels, and not just the content, but actually the way I've done it. So because in the Italian, because I work with an Italian, I don't just work with the translation that they send, I've worked with an Italian speaker, native Italian speaker, an academic who's taken me through the Italian version as well, discussing how his comedy works and how he uses the vernacular, which you can't translate vernacular. So it's got to be, okay, so and I'm working in a Northern English vernacular, which actually is very faux, but it doesn't directly translate, but it does in spirit.
Is that something, working with a native speaker, is that something you've done with all of the translations that you've done? Yeah, I can see how that...
Yeah, I did it with the Russian ones.
Yeah. There's a wonderful translation of another Dario Fo Franco-Rama play, which is Elizabeth, which is based around Elizabeth I, and it's translated by Gillian Hanna, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Oh, right, yeah.
And in the translation, there's a character who speaks in this incredible, as you say, faux kind of invented. It was played by Fo originally. Invented kind of patois of all kinds of dialects and antiquated Italian words and bits of probably bits of Latin or whatever. And in the translation, she's created this language which is part sort of Yorkshire, part Shakespearean, part but she also in an appendix gives here's literally the translation. Here's what it literally means. So as you say, I mean. There's no definitive translation of anything, so it's constantly reinventing it, isn't it?
But that is the job, to bring. And Steve, who was in the cast years ago when we were talking to him about Anarchist, he talked about the fact that Fo often seems to be still with one foot in Milan. So you're never quite sure. So when the adaptation doesn't quite... It's got to be sensitive to the original, but it's also got to help us be culturally English, and particularly this, specifically Northern, or at least that feel to it. And so what we try to do with the adaptation is help Fo's journey from Milan to Middlesbrough or Manchester, wherever it may be, and successfully reroute it so it feels like it belongs there, not when you... I mean, that's part of the reason why we translate or adapt the names, so they're not their English names. Because often in translations you get you get an English thing and you suddenly get Malachi.
Well, we did it in Accidental Death of an Anarchist.
Yeah, you suddenly go, Giovanni? Where are we all of a sudden?
Yeah.
And in Accidental Death of an Anarchist, I left the names Italian because it gave us, but they had sort of versions. So was it Sergeant Inspector Bertozzo became Bertie,
right.
And they called him Bertie Bertozzo. So Pisani was George because he did a George Formby impersonation. There was all the kind of thing, and then there was a moment when the maniac turned to the audience and said, when yet another Italian name came out, just turned to the audience and said, "Is it me, or are there a lot of Italian people in this play?"
Yes.
So then you sort of you break the fourth wall, you do that very faux thing of breaking the fourth wall and sharing that it's an Italian play.
It's probably more pertinent for the Russian adaptations because they do keep, Yeslenikov and Kovner. You go, really? You don't remember who that is.
Well, I remember there was Bob Chinsky and Dobchinsky were Bob
Sidebottom and Longbottom.
That's right, wasn't it? So it's a similar sort of thing.
Well, also we had in the Government Inspector, all those jokes, all those names that Gogol writes are jokes.
Yeah.
And if you leave them in the Russian, nobody English knows what they are. Yeah. So there's a councillor called Strawberry, and the name is actually Strawberry.
Right.
In Russian.
Yes, an onion, is it?
And there's onion, I called him Pickles.
Right.
And Councillor Strawberry, I made a woman, so we did a little bit of change the gender there. So, and Councillor Strawberry was really rather fruity. And Belcher was because it was the mayor, and which was because the original Russian word meant a puff of wind.
Right.
So I called him Belcher, which was kind of phlegmatic and sort of, whatever.
And that's what you get from working with a native speaker. They'll give you those.
And also, but when you leave that sort of Russian context, it becomes meaningless, and it's academically it's terribly interesting, but in fact for us in the theatre that's for the birds.
It sort of drags you out of the play, I think, a little bit. If it does me, so you suddenly put this Russian thing and you think, what? We do all this work to try and bring it closer, and then suddenly you deliberately alienate it. It's like some Paul Brechtian thing where it actually just abandons you on the seashore. You think, God, let me be part of this production, not feel alienated by it.
Yeah. I think I mentioned earlier you mentioned that Dario Fo has reworked this play, I think you said, Deb, about in the light of the banking crisis, and you're working from that version. Yes. What's the politics of the piece? What's Fo's kind of...
Well, he's shifted it slightly because I think in terms of... You get the message from the way he changed the title. Sadly, from the very pithy can't pay, won't pay, to the slightly less pithy they don't pay, we won't pay, which is related. So what he does is he draws out of the play not just the kind of food poverty and inflation and all the things and the brutality of that early 70s Italy. He sort of draws it right through and pulls out the banking crash and the fact that, he felt, and it becomes apparent in the way that he reworks the ending, he felt very depressed that after 40 years nothing had changed. He'd been fighting all these years, and since he wrote that play, in fact, things had got sort of worse. And capitalism had kind of crashed and burned, and yet remained undefeated because the bankers had been bailed out. They'd been buoyant, they'd been held up by governments, and there was the kind of, again, the poor, the working people, the ordinary people, sort of bearing the cost of this rampant capitalism which had collapsed, mismanagement, greed and incompetence, and just absolute rampant, unbridled capitalism. That had happened, and he went, it failed, see? Oh, so why has nothing changed? Why hasn't the world suddenly gone, what we need is a socialist utopia, which of course they didn't. And I think he was pretty blue about that, really, and I think that comes through in the way that he reworked his play. And we are grappling with that, and we have grappled with that in the adaptation because it feels very personal for Fo at this point. To me, as a writer, getting inside him, the writer, in working on his play, it feels very personal to him. So I want to honour him and honour his feelings, and yet at the same time make that speak to our Brexit Britain, that needs a message of hope to some extent, I think. So it is. It's tricky but it's an interesting challenge.
Just possibly sort of lastly on this particular process, and then I would like to talk just a bit about your other work and Broadsides kind of in general. There's a few returning actors in this piece that did, I think you alluded to before, did also perform in the earlier Fo, and you've worked with sort of time and again. I mean, there's this sense of a bit of a family, a bit of a sort of a familiar kind of.
I think, to be honest, it's not only Broadsides, or it's a lot of companies that even rep, but obviously the turnover is slightly different in rep company. But certainly a company that's been going this long does have a family feel to it. And hopefully all the positive things about family, that's what you need to whittle it down to, because there are plenty of negative things about family, but we're looking at the positive. So if you've got somebody who's really good and they've come along with the company, they understand with the language of the company, they can interpret, they can bring their own freshness and interpretation, why wouldn't you have them in if they want to come? We mingle that, we sort of augment that with new people. So this is a sort of learning, some ways, by osmosis. It was ever thus, when I used to hang around in the corridors and actors used to come out going, I've no idea what to do, and I'd chat them through to it, and subsequently they've gone on to chat with other actors and you to a company like that. It is a family, and there's lots of very enthusiastic and faithful alumni who've been through, particularly Broadsides, who keep coming back, and even if they don't come back for lots of reasons, show their support and their enthusiasm for it, because it is a very particular atmosphere, the company. I can't explain that unless you're from the inside.
But I also think as well, obviously from the point of view of variety, it's historically it's always happened, not making any comparisons, but obviously William Shakespeare wrote for a repertory company of actors who he knew, and what tends to happen with us with the writing is, as soon as I know who's playing the part, that informs the writing. That it does, because I know the actors, and as an actor myself, I could sort of get inside them as actors a little bit and feel them out and kind of tailor the work towards them. So hopefully, again, we get a bespoke, fitted, suit of clothes for everyone and for the company and for the, obviously when I write for Broadsides, it's different to how I write for perhaps someone else or for another company, for another director.
It would be really tricky. In fact, we've seen it done, and that's not a criticism of the productions, when I've seen our version of Accidental Death of an Anarchist reinterpreted for another company. In my opinion, it's not as good, because the suit was made to fit us. Yeah. So anybody who subsequently tries it on, unless they alter it, unpick it, and alter it right from the core, right back from where we started from, it's gonna either be too tight in places, a bit bulging here, and so that's not an ideal fit. You wouldn't want to go to a wedding look like that. So, you want to make the best you can. The government inspector is another one. Suddenly you've got this play with all brass players in, with all those different skills. It's really difficult to redo. Cyrano and things like that. People ask me for the music and stuff like that, and I go, well, this is what it, and they go, oh, I see, we can't unpick it. It's just too big a task. Because actually in 4 weeks, 3 weeks in this instance, we're creating a hell of a lot of work, and it's not just the 3-4 weeks in rehearsal, it's the months before it that built up to that process. So I'm pleased about that ensemble feel, I'm pleased about the family feel. For sure, we must and do make sure that we augment it all the time, and it's welcoming and it's open. It's not a door that you can't come into. It's a door please do come into and stay for a while and have a chat. It's open, and some people will like it and some people won't, but the people who really like it stay and want to come back and contribute. And I think
the shorthand doesn't matter, because of the nature of the kind of the part of the food chain that we operate in terms of arts funding and everything. We're not the Royal Shakespeare Company. We haven't got 8, 10, 12 weeks rehearsal. We've got 3. So having actors in the room who know the drill, got the shorthand, the script is already tailored towards their strengths. All those things that are happening, kind of, it's front loaded in that way, so that when you hit the ground running on day one of rehearsal, there's a lot already in place that you sort of can't. But you can't buy.
But even in this company, there's people who've worked with. In fact, everyone has worked for this company, but I've not worked with everybody in concerts with the company as a director. So Steve and Lisa, I've not worked with. Obviously, they've been part of the company. Mike, I've worked with loads, because he played the maniac in Anarchist. Matt Connor as well. I've worked with him. So there are a few people and Sue's. I've worked with her once before, but there's still a lot of journeying to find out how we work together, because being in the room with me is a different experience. It just is. That's the truth of it. So,
well, especially working on this, I mean, not just Con's methods, but this very particular style of theatre. You can't have your standard method of directing that you learned during your MA at wherever and bring it to this. This is so much about being a theatre animal. This play was made by a theatre animal, and we are theatre animals. We're playhouse creatures, and so we bring that experience and that sort of that technical knowledge to this very particularly. Directing or writing a different sort of play, then you go in the toolkit and you pull a few different things out for that thing. But this one is absolutely
there's an incredible musicality within it. That's not about music, but it's about
rhythm.
music. It's about the rhythm, but it's also about the context. And so you have to make every line have a different intention, colour. I know that sounds a bit methody, but the colour overall, it's like splitting up a white light into a lot of its component colours. So you get clearly defined colours across a speech, across a line. It could be across, 4 words, and then it's only when they've got clarity you can put them back together, and then you get a clear light at the end of it. But those component parts, to break them down, people are always surprised at how much detail you go. I stop them after a line, not because I'm being obtuse about it, but just go, well, it can't be the same thought the next line. Or a writer, let's say it's a piece of Shakespeare, you go, well, you've got to give the guy some credit. He wouldn't have written a whole speech if it's all going to sound the same. Hero, for example, a young girl, she just floats on the surface for quite a lot of passage. You just think, it can't be that.
It's not general.
It's not general at all. And actually, it's much more the response from actors when you work to them, say, in the moment, they suddenly go, it suddenly becomes alive and human, like we're all animated. But on the stage, sometimes it becomes brown in terms of its pallor. Do you know?
And I think it's because it gets sort of conflated with reality in the wrong way. So actors think it's about what they feel in the moment, and that is irrelevant. Even in the most, Stanislavski can have a holiday. It's what you feel that's not relevant. What the audience feel is what matters, and how you communicate what's the character feeling and what are the audience experiencing. The actor can leave their own feelings at the door, because that's going to take too long, and it's also going to mean that they're going to internalise, and we're not going to see it. And there's a lot of that goes on as well. Even with naturalism, it's not interesting. It's boring.
Well, you're sort of going back to that thing about the technicality behind the apparent spontaneity.
It's art.
That's right. It's the technicality. You think, oh God, that just happened.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen because I'm a bangy thing. But how many times you see in a rehearsal, people will say "Good morning," and they'll put something down on the line. When in reality, we probably didn't
hear that on the tape at all.
you get a sound. When in reality would you ever anybody in the world would put something on as they speak? Put something down. It's trite. You always go, "Good morning," close the door. You don't think about it in real life, but you deconstruct that, and then you say, "Right, let's go again." You go, "I'm going, good morning," close the door. Good morning, close the door. Suddenly it becomes a huge exercise, but we are much more rhythmical, much more just savvy in terms of that sort of musicality in real life than on stage. So what we're trying to do is unpick the musicality of that and go and just make sure that everybody knows what's happening at every single time, which is a dull thing, in some ways, but it works in the end. Suddenly, boom, nobody loses anything. When do you bring down? When you pick that up? When do you say that? When does that go down? Suddenly becomes, the whole thing is a series of routines that become, like you said, spontaneous, but not at all.
It happens on text as well. Nobody in real life ever goes, "I'm going to the shops." And yet, for some reason, suddenly they start acting. Stop acting. The nouns and the verbs.
Easy as that.
Forget you're going to the shops. It's extraordinary how people they start acting, and then they live with an illusion that inside it's happening and it's real. There's an awful lot of that goes on.
We all do it.
We all do.
That's not casting saying, "Oh, hey, them like that."
But it's about knowing. It's about knowing it, and being aware of it.
I think that's when you're on the outside. That's a great part of your job, because sometimes you can't see it from the inside. I did a recording sometimes on the radio, and a fellow thing, I thought, "Oh God, I thought that was good." And I listen back and think, "Oh, I really could have made a better fist at that." But that outside ear, is really useful, because you can. That's part of the direction thing about steering things in, the right way, in the way that you think is right.
That's great. And I don't want to take up too much more of your time, because I know you've actually got to get back to the dwindling 3 weeks of rehearsal you've got left. But I do just want to quickly touch on, I think since last we spoke to you, Conrad, at the British Theatre Guide, you've taken on the mantle of Artistic Director of Northern Broadsides.
Yeah, so I've taken on the Artistic Directorship for Broadsides for a 12-month period, from March, I think it was March this year to March next year. And all of a sudden we're in September, and you feel like, where has it gone? But it's been terrific, and what we put into place to sort of help this company move and develop and stuff, we put a lot of education stuff in. We've got projects now planned up beyond next year and ideas going forward. So it's about taking what the company was and really enjoying that and augmenting the offer and freshening the offer and bringing it to 2018 so it really speaks to people. But the education thing has been great. I was talking before about the education project that we're doing as part of York University with Don't Pay, Won't Pay, which is great. When we do Much Ado next year, we'll be doing another education process. It's not just about that, but planning things with the Writers Guild of Great Britain, looking lots of different terrific conversations with extremely enthusiastic and important and interested artistic directors across the platform. So great conversations that have been really positive. So that's been a delight. You know, it'll take the whole process of Broadsides is a changing one. You know, it's about morphing, not losing what it was, but finding what it could be as well, and that's an interesting process. And I'll look forward to doing that until the end of March next year.
Great. So you mentioned there's a production of Much Ado coming up.
Yes, so it's a co-production again. So 7th of January we'll be starting that. So I'm trying to cast that at the moment.
So the New Vic Theatre.
Yeah, New Vic Theatre. So we've got quite a well-known actor to play Benedict, which will be great. I need to find a sort of a match for him as a Beatrice, which is proving a little bit more difficult because getting people to tour is tricky, and obviously women of particular age and got children and the rest of it. It's tricky. I completely get it. To spend sort of 5-6 months on the road is tricky. But if you know of anybody out there who's really, really good and wants to play Beatrice, that would be exciting. So, I mean, there's going to be 16 people in that. That's a hell of a lot of people to cast. So I'm doing this one at the moment. Then Deb and I have got a company. We've almost cast that, the next play. So in between Much Ado and that, we're doing a new play called Hot Lane, which is a site-specific piece in Stoke-on-Trent. So there's quite a lot to do, which is great.
And Deb, do you want to just tell us a bit more? I know that you've got not one but 2 enormous Christmas shows coming up.
Like buses, aren't they? It's just the way it worked out. Amy Leach from the West Yorkshire Playhouse, now the Leeds Playhouse, directed my new adaptation of Christmas Carol for Hull Truck last Christmas, and because Leeds Playhouse knew they were going into their new pop-up space while all the work was being done on the building, I think they had already made the decision to do a Christmas Carol, but they didn't know which version. And they all came to see the Hull Truck version and went, why don't we do that one? So that's how I ended up. And Amy's going to direct it again, and Hayley Grindle's designing, and it's all kind of same production. And then, as it so happened, Mark Babbage, who's the artistic director at Hull Truck, had commissioned an Oliver Twist from me years ago at Bolton, which was on at Bolton, and he rang me up early and he says, quite fancy doing your Oliver Twist at Christmas, what do you think? So as it happens, that's what we're doing. So I've got 2 at Yorkshire M62, and here at York as well with Can't Pay. So I feel like they don't pay, we won't pay. Stop calling it Can't Pay, won't. So busy, and the Hot Lane, which is my kind of my baby, the Claybody Theatre Company in Stoke-on-Trent, which is a great sort of joy for us, and that's a totally new play. So it's always good to kind of...
Is it in the same site as the last piece?
Spode,
Works,
It was great because, I mean, obviously we've been around for a reasonable length of time now, and people will come, people who know it from Broadsides and obviously local, but we had people come down from Scotland, from York, just come and see the play. Really fantastic to see them suddenly. What are you doing here?
In Spode, and it is great when I can get to just work on an original piece that just comes out of my head, and there's I don't feel like I'm beholden to anyone else, and I can just make it up.
I mean, Dario Fo.
Even though I love having Dario Fo and Charles Dickens in the room, it's it's no hardship really.
Well, I'd love to carry on this conversation, talk loads more to you about adaptation and new writing, but we'll have to draw it to a close, I'm afraid. Just to say that They Don't Pay, We Won't Pay opens at the York Theatre Royal on the 5th of October. It's there for a couple of weeks before touring to the Yvonne Arnaud Theatre in Guildford, Hull Truck Theatre, the Liverpool Playhouse, the New Vic Theatre in Newcastle-under-Lyme, the Lawrence Batley Theatre in Huddersfield, Scarborough's Stephen Joseph Theatre, before ending its tour at Northern Broadsides' home at the Viaduct Theatre in Halifax. Conrad and Deborah, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks very much.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.